The storm that night was not just weather, it was a force of nature. Sheets of rain slammed against rooftops, turning gutters into rivers and streets into dark, trembling lakes. Lightning cracked across the sky with blinding flashes that seemed to rip the night apart, while thunder rolled like an angry drumbeat chasing everything in its path. For anyone standing outside, the storm was merciless. For Noah, sitting inside his small, weathered home, it was a reminder of how fragile everything could feel. He had just finished tucking in his daughter, Ellie, when the storm's fury reached its peak. She was only 7, bright-eyed and tender-hearted, with curls that framed her little face like a halo. She hated storms, but Noah had told her the truth in the simplest way he knew. The sky is just shouting because it needs to be heard. It always made her smile, even when fear trembled at the edge of her eyes. Noah sat for a moment in the living room, listening to the tin roof rattle under the downpour. He wore a hoodie that had seen better years, its cuffs stretched and faded, the fabric thinning at the elbows. Life had not been kind to him. Since the day he lost his wife in a car accident 2 years ago, every day had felt like climbing uphill barefoot. His job at the mechanic's shop paid just enough to keep food on the table and Ellie's asthma medication stocked in the cabinet, but there was never anything left over. The house had cracks in the walls and a leak in the roof, but Noah had learned to live with them. What he hadn't learned was how to stop feeling the absence of the woman he loved every single day. The storm reminded him of that absence. The hollow silence beside him on the couch. The soft laugh that no longer echoed down the hall. The steady reassurance that someone was sharing the weight with him. Now, it was just him and Ellie fighting against the world and hoping the world didn't fight too hard back. Then came the knock. It was sharp, sudden, and out of place. 3 firm raps against the wooden door, almost drowned out by the roar of rain and wind. Noah froze. No one visited him at night. Certainly not in weather like this. His heart stuttered as he stood, pulling the hoodie tighter around himself. For a second he wondered if he'd imagined it, if the storm had played a trick on his ears. But then it came again, louder, more desperate. Another knock. This one carried something else. Not casual, not polite. It was the kind of knock that said, "Help me." He approached the door cautiously, every instinct in him torn between curiosity and caution. He lived in a quiet neighborhood where people minded their own business, but even here, opening the door to strangers in the dead of night felt like stepping into the unknown. When he finally turned the handle and pulled it open, the sight on his porch stopped him cold. 2 girls stood there. Young. Identical. Their soaked hair clung to their pale faces, dripping streams of water onto the wooden planks. Their clothes, thin dresses torn at the edges, plastered to their shivering bodies. Their arms wrapped tightly around each other, not just for warmth, but for strength. Their eyes, wide, dark, and filled with something deeper than cold, met his, and in that moment Noah saw fear. Not just fear of the storm, but fear of something larger, something they weren't saying. For a heartbeat, none of them spoke. The storm screamed around them, rattling the windows and pushing water across the porch, but the silence between Noah and the girls was louder still. Finally, one of them opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. Her lips trembled too much. The other girl tried, whispering in a voice so fragile it could have been mistaken for the wind. "Please, can we come in?" Noah didn't hesitate long. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was the soft echo of his wife's voice in the back of his mind telling him that kindness always mattered most. But before his thoughts could catch up, his hand pulled the door wider. "Come in," he said firmly, though his own voice surprised him with its urgency. The 2 girls stepped inside quickly, dragging the storm in with them. Rainwater pooled immediately onto his worn carpet, darkening the fibers, but Noah didn't care. They stood dripping near the couch, arms still wrapped around each other, like 2 figures carved out of the same mold. Their breaths came in shallow, uneven waves, and Noah noticed details that made his chest tighten. Cuts on their hands, smudges of dirt across their forearms, and thin red dresses that looked more suited for summer than a night like this. Torn hems suggested they had run hard, maybe through trees or across rough ground. He grabbed towels from the bathroom and the thickest sweaters he could find in his and Ellie's drawers. "Here," he said softly, handing them over. The girls clutched the towels like lifelines, drying their hair and wrapping the sweaters tightly around themselves. Their trembling slowed, but their eyes still darted toward the door as though expecting someone or something to burst in behind them. From the hallway, a small voice broke the tension. "Daddy, who are they?" Noah turned to see Ellie standing in the doorway of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. Her pajama top hung loosely on her small frame, curls sticking in every direction. She looked at the strangers with a mixture of wonder and worry. "They're guests," Noah said gently. It's late and they needed a place to stay. The little girl nodded slowly, accepting his answer without further question. Her trust in him was absolute, and that thought tightened his throat. The twins glanced at each other, then back at Noah as if debating whether to speak. At last one of them found her voice. "My name is Anna," she said, her tone shaky but determined. She gestured toward her sister. "This is Grace." Noah gave a small nod. "I'm Noah. That's Ellie." "Hi," Ellie whispered, giving them a tiny wave before retreating behind her father. Anna managed a faint smile. Our car broke down. We've been walking for hours. We didn't know where else to go." Noah studied them carefully. Something in their eyes, in the way Anna's voice wavered when she spoke, told him the story wasn't complete. There was more, something heavy they were carrying. But he didn't push. "Not yet." "Then you're staying here tonight?" he said simply. No arguments. The relief that crossed their faces was quick but undeniable. Grace exhaled sharply, almost as if she'd been holding her breath since the moment he opened the door. Ellie peeked back out again, her curiosity bubbling over. "They can share my room," she said with the innocent certainty only children could carry. "Nobody should sleep cold." Noah's lips tugged into the faintest smile. "We'll see about that, sweetheart. Go get back in bed. I'll check on you soon." She nodded and disappeared into her room. The twins settled awkwardly onto the couch, still clutching their towels. For a while, silence stretched between them, broken only by the hammering rain outside. Noah sat across the room, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He wanted to ask 100 questions. Where had they come from? Why were they walking in weather like this? Was someone looking for them? But something in their guarded posture warned him against it. Instead, he tried a softer approach. "You hungry? I can put together something. It's not much, but—" Grace shook her head quickly. "No, thank you. We're fine." Her stomach betrayed her with a faint growl and her cheeks flushed. Noah pretended not to notice. The minutes stretched on and slowly the tightness in the room eased. The storm outside still raged, but inside, the flicker of the old lamp on the side table cast a softer glow, wrapping them in warmth the storm couldn't touch. Noah leaned back, studying them with quiet concern. He didn't know what had brought them to his doorstep, but one thing was certain. Whatever storm raged outside, the storm inside those girls was far worse. And for tonight at least, his home would be their shelter. The storm pressed hard against the windows, whistling through the small cracks in the old frame. It made the whole house feel alive, as if the weather itself was trying to crawl inside. Yet, for the first time that night, Noah felt the tension in the room begin to ease. The twins were no longer shaking as violently, wrapped in sweaters that hung loose on their thin shoulders. Ellie tiptoed back into the living room, carrying her favorite blanket. She dragged it across the floor until she reached the couch where Anna and Grace sat. Without hesitation, she spread it over their laps. "You'll be warmer now," she said softly. The twins glanced down at the blanket, then at Ellie, and for the first time since they'd arrived, their expressions softened. Grace touched the fabric gently as though it was something rare, something she hadn't been offered in a long while. "Thank you," Anna whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain. Ellie gave a proud little nod, then nestled beside her father on the recliner. The clock ticked past midnight, and Noah eventually rose to prepare a place for them to sleep. The couch wasn't much, but with extra blankets it would do. Ellie, however, had other plans. "They should sleep in my room," she insisted, standing with her small hands on her hips like a tiny general. "There's space for all of us if we squeeze." Noah chuckled softly. "You think so?" "Yes," she said, already tugging on Grace's sleeve. "Come on. It's better in there." Anna hesitated, her wary eyes darting toward Noah, but when Grace gave a slight nod, they both followed Ellie down the short hallway. Noah set up the extra bedding anyway just in case. But when he peeked into Ellie's room later, the sight stopped him in his tracks. The three girls were huddled together on the same bed, tangled in blankets, their breaths rising and falling in unison. Ellie's small arm was draped protectively across Anna's waist, while Grace's hand rested lightly on Ellie's shoulder. They looked like sisters who had known each other for years, not strangers who'd met only hours ago. Something tugged deep in Noah's chest, a mix of warmth and sorrow. He stood there quietly, leaning against the doorframe, unable to look away. It reminded him of the first night he'd brought Ellie home from the hospital. She had been so tiny then, so fragile, and he had been terrified. But as he'd watched her sleep that night, he'd felt the same thing he felt now, a surge of protectiveness so strong it nearly buckled his knees. He closed the door gently and returned to the living room. The storm still battered the house, but inside, the quiet hum of safety had settled. He sank into the recliner, exhaustion pulling at him, but sleep didn't come easily. Questions churned in his mind. Why had the girls really come? Why had they been walking in the middle of a storm in torn dresses, looking more like they had escaped something than broken down on the side of the road? The way they avoided eye contact when they spoke. The nervous glances toward the door. The flinch at sudden sounds. None of it sat right. Noah had learned to trust his gut after years of hardship. And tonight, his gut told him that Anna and Grace were carrying secrets. Secrets heavier than two teenage girls should have to bear. But for now he pushed those thoughts aside. Tonight, they were just children in need of safety and he wasn't about to fail them. He leaned back, listening to the muffled laughter drifting faintly from Ellie's room as the girls whispered to each other before sleep took them. It was the kind of sound he hadn't heard in a long time, innocent, unguarded joy. It filled the house with something he hadn't realized had been missing. Hope. And though Noah didn't know it yet, that night would be the first step into a storm far greater than the one outside. When Noah woke the next morning, the house was quiet, unnervingly so. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the dripping of rainwater from the eaves and the earthy scent of wet soil wafting through the cracked window. The silence felt heavy, as though the world was holding its breath after the night's chaos. He pushed himself out of the recliner, stretching sore muscles. His hoodie clung damply to his back. He must have dozed off sometime after midnight. Rubbing his eyes, he moved down the hallway and paused outside Ellie's room. The door was half open and he peeked inside. The three girls were still curled together beneath a fortress of blankets, but now the storm had been replaced by something gentler, the sunlight breaking through the curtains, painting them in stripes of gold. Ellie's curls were tangled, her face relaxed in deep sleep, while Anna and Grace clung to each other even in rest, their expressions soft but shadowed. Noah let out a long breath. For a moment he allowed himself to simply watch them. Then he pulled the door shut and headed for the kitchen. Breakfast was simple: eggs fried in a battered pan, toast browned unevenly in the toaster that had a mind of its own. He brewed coffee strong enough to jolt his tired body awake, then filled a glass of milk for Ellie. By the time the smell of food filled the air, the girls had woken. They shuffled into the kitchen timidly, still wrapped in borrowed sweaters. Ellie trailed after them, chattering with the unfiltered brightness of a child. "Daddy made eggs. And toast. It's the good kind too, not the burnt one," she announced proudly. Grace's lips tugged into a fleeting smile, and Anna let out a breathy laugh that sounded like it had been buried for too long. They sat at the small kitchen table, glancing around the cramped but tidy space. Noah noticed how their eyes lingered on the peeling wallpaper, the chipped mugs, the faded linoleum floor, but not with judgment. More like curiosity. As if the ordinary mess of his life was foreign to them. "Eat as much as you'd like," Noah said, sliding plates toward them. At first they ate cautiously as though afraid they were taking too much. But soon their hunger overpowered hesitation, and they cleaned their plates with quiet gratitude. Ellie peppered them with questions between bites, what their favorite color was, if they liked board games, whether they had pets. Anna and Grace answered with small smiles, never giving more than they had to, their eyes always flicking toward each other before speaking. When Noah asked the practical question, "Want me to take a look at your car after breakfast?" the room shifted. Anna's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Grace's eyes darted to her sister's, and in that split second of silence, Noah saw something pass between them. Fear. Hesitation. A truth too big for them to share. "No," Anna said quickly, her tone sharper than she intended. She set the fork down, forcing a smile. "We'll figure it out. Don't worry." Noah didn't push, though the knot in his stomach tightened. He changed the subject, talking instead about Ellie's school and the weather forecast. But the unease lingered. Later that afternoon, after the girls had retreated to play a board game with Ellie in the living room, Noah stepped outside to get some air. The storm had left everything washed clean, the sky a pale winter blue. Puddles reflected the bare branches of trees, and the air smelled of damp asphalt. That was when he saw it. At the corner of the street, a black SUV idled. Its windows were tinted too dark to see through, but the low hum of its engine carried on the wet air. It didn't move. Didn't signal. Just sat there watching. Noah's gut clenched. He stared at it for a long moment, his breath fogging in the cold air. Something about the vehicle didn't belong here. In this quiet neighborhood, cars didn't linger without reason. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the SUV rolled forward. Tires hissed against the damp pavement, water splashing as it turned the corner and disappeared from view. When Noah returned inside, Anna and Grace were whispering in the corner, their faces pale. They snapped upright when they noticed him, their smiles forced. He didn't ask. Not yet. But he knew whatever secret they carried had just followed them to his doorstep. The tension in the house thickened after the SUV sighting. Even Ellie, who usually filled every silence with questions and giggles, seemed to sense something had shifted. She played quietly with her dolls that evening, sneaking glances at Anna and Grace as though trying to figure out why the laughter had drained from their eyes. Noah pretended to read the paper, but his attention never left the twins. Every movement they made carried the weight of hesitation. Every sound from outside, the crunch of tires, the slam of a door, made them flinch as if expecting the storm to come crashing back in a different form. Finally, when Ellie was tucked into bed, the truth began to crack open. The girls sat across from Noah at the kitchen table, their hands tangled together so tightly their knuckles blanched. Grace's lips trembled before she spoke. "We weren't honest with you," she whispered. Anna squeezed her sister's hand and took over, her voice steadier but edged with guilt. "We didn't just break down on the side of the road. We left on purpose." Noah leaned back, arms crossed, watching them closely. "Left what?" "Our home," Anna said. Noah frowned. "What? Where are your parents?" Grace's eyes glistened. She shook her head. "It's just our mother. Our father, he's been gone for years." "And she," Grace faltered, biting her lip. Anna filled the silence. "She's rich. A millionaire. Always gone on business. When she is home, she's colder than ice. She doesn't talk to us. Doesn't see us. We're just things to her. Like trophies she can forget about when she's busy chasing more money." The words landed heavy in the small kitchen. Noah blinked, trying to reconcile the image of these frightened, shivering girls with the idea that they belonged to a mansion, to privilege. He glanced at their dresses again, thin and torn, completely out of place in a storm. "Why run away?" he asked quietly. Grace swallowed hard. "Because we were invisible there. We had food, clothes, everything people think matters, but not love. Not home. Not the warmth we felt here in just one night." Her voice broke and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Anna's jaw tightened, though her eyes betrayed the same ache. "We don't care about the money, the house, the guards at the gate. We wanted something real. Even if it meant sleeping on the street." For a long time Noah said nothing. His gaze dropped to the chipped wood of the table, where years of use had left small grooves and scratches. He thought of Ellie, of the nights she had woken from nightmares calling out for him. He thought of the way her face lit up every time he picked her up from school, as if he were the most important person in the world. And then he thought of these two girls who had all the money in the world but none of what truly mattered. He felt anger stir in his chest, not at them but at their mother. At the idea that someone could trade love for wealth so carelessly. He knew what it meant to lose love unwillingly. He could never understand choosing to throw it away. "You don't have to explain everything," Noah finally said, his voice low but firm. "You're safe here. Whatever storm you're running from, it stops at my door." The twins' eyes shone with gratitude, though Noah could see the conflict burning behind them. Relief, guilt, fear, it all swirled together in a storm of its own. Grace wiped her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Noah nodded, though his mind was already racing. If their mother was who they said she was, she wouldn't stop looking. Wealth came with reach, with power. And that black SUV outside wasn't coincidence. As the girls headed to bed, Noah lingered at the table, staring at the dark window where his own reflection looked back at him. He thought of his wife again, what she would have said if she'd been here. "You did the right thing," he imagined her whispering. "But this isn't the end. It's only the beginning." And deep down he knew it was true. 2 days passed in uneasy calm. The girls stayed close to Ellie, helping her with puzzles, sharing whispered jokes, even braiding her curls while she giggled. It was as if they were trying to soak in every ounce of normalcy Noah's modest home could give them. But beneath the laughter, their eyes betrayed constant vigilance. At every knock of the pipes, every passing car, their bodies stiffened. Noah felt it too, the sense that time was running out. He caught himself checking the window more often, scanning the street for that same black SUV. He tried to bury the unease, but in the quiet of the night, it clawed at him. The reckoning came one cold morning. Noah was fixing the loose hinge on the front door when headlights swept across his driveway. A sleek black SUV rolled in, its polished surface gleaming even in the gray light. The sight hit him like a punch. He stood frozen, screwdriver in hand, as the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Tall, poised, and dressed in clothes that looked like they had been made for her and her alone. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement with measured precision. Her hair, perfectly styled, didn't shift in the breeze. There was an aura about her, a presence that filled the space before she even spoke. The girls appeared in the doorway behind Noah. The moment their eyes met hers, their shoulders stiffened. Grace's breath hitched audibly, and Anna's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Mother," Anna whispered, the word heavy with equal parts fear and defiance. Noah stepped aside instinctively, shielding them with his frame. The woman's gaze flicked to him, cool and assessing, before returning to her daughters. "You've caused quite the commotion," she said, her voice low, polished, controlled. Not a trace of warmth lingered in the syllables. Grace's eyes brimmed with tears. "We didn't want to go back." The woman's expression tightened ever so slightly. She took a step forward, her designer heels sinking slightly into the damp ground. "You don't get to decide that," she said. "You are my responsibility. My family." Noah's jaw clenched. He had kept quiet, but now his voice broke the standoff. "Family isn't just a word," he said, steady and calm. "It's not about money or last names. It's about being there. About love. And from what I've heard, you've left these girls to feel like they had none." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes, an almost imperceptible crack in the ice. She looked at her daughters again, not with the disapproval of a parent inconvenienced, but with something closer to uncertainty. Grace took a step forward, her voice trembling. "Do you even know what my favorite color is? Uranus. Do you know that we hate the sound of empty hallways? That we feel invisible in that big house? You don't see us. You only see what you want." Anna's voice, steadier, followed. "We wanted a home. We found it here, even just for a few nights. Do you understand that?" The woman's lips parted, but no words came. Her gaze flicked around Noah's modest home, lingering on the peeling paint, the patched roof, the second-hand furniture. She should have sneered, Noah thought. But instead, her eyes softened when they fell back on her daughters, standing close together, brave despite their fear. Silence stretched long and taut. Then, slowly she reached out a hand. "Come home," she said quietly. The words were no longer an order, but a plea. Anna and Grace looked at each other. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, tears streaming down their cheeks, they stepped forward and embraced her. Noah watched, his chest tight. It wasn't perfect, not even close. But something had shifted in that moment, the first crack in a wall that had stood too tall for too long. When the woman finally turned to him, her voice was softer than before. "Thank you," she said. Not with the shallow politeness of wealth, but with the sincerity of someone who realized what they had nearly lost. Noah only nodded, stepping back as the three of them walked toward the SUV. The storm outside had passed days ago. But inside, another storm had begun to settle into uneasy calm. The house felt impossibly quiet after the black SUV pulled away. Noah stood at the doorway long after the taillights disappeared, the faint rumble of the engine fading into the distance. His hand still rested on the doorframe, the screwdriver lying forgotten at his feet. Inside, Ellie tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are they coming back?" Her question pierced through him. He crouched down, brushing a curl from her forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart," he admitted. "But they'll be okay." Ellie nodded, though her eyes lingered on the empty road as if willing the sisters to return. She was too young to understand the complexities of wealth and neglect, but she understood what mattered most. Anna and Grace had been her friends, if only for a short while. That evening the house felt hollow. The laughter that had filled the corners of the living room, the whispering giggles before bedtime, the warmth of three girls huddled under blankets, it was gone. Yet Noah couldn't shake the sense that something important had taken root. 2 days later he found an envelope in the mailbox. It was plain, sealed neatly with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check. The amount made his breath catch. It was enough to cover months of rent, repair the leaking roof, and pay for Ellie's asthma medication without fear of debt. But it wasn't the money that stunned him most, it was the letter. "Noah, I don't know how to thank you. You opened your door when you had nothing to spare, and in doing so, you gave me something I didn't realize I had lost: perspective. My daughters are not ornaments. They are not burdens. They are my heart, though I had forgotten how to show it. You reminded me. I promise I will try to be the mother they deserve. Al." Noah read it twice, then a third time, the words sinking in deeper with every pass. He folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the envelope. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter, not because of the check, but because of the affirmation that kindness, even when it seemed small, mattered. That night, as he tucked Ellie into bed, she looked up at him with her wide, trusting eyes. "Daddy, why did they have to leave?" He hesitated, searching for words that would make sense to her. Finally he said, "Sometimes people need to lose something to understand what they really have." Anna and Grace's mother needed that. And maybe she'll never forget this time with them. Ellie thought about that for a moment, then nodded solemnly. I hope she hugs them every night now. Noah's chest ached, but he smiled. Me too, kiddo. Me too. As the days turned into weeks, life returned to its rhythm. Noah went back to work at the mechanic's shop, fixing cars and scraping together extra hours when he could. Ellie went back to school, bringing home messy drawings and endless stories. Yet in quiet moments, Noah often found himself remembering Anna and Grace, the way their guarded expressions had softened in the warmth of his home, the way they had clung to Ellie as if she was the anchor they'd been searching for. And sometimes, when the night was still and the house too silent, he thought of their mother too. He wondered if she truly kept her promise, if the crack he saw in her armor had widened into something more lasting. He hoped so for the girl's sake and for hers. But most of all, he thought about what those days had reminded him. That wealth meant nothing without love. That family was built not on money or possessions, but on the willingness to show up, again and again in the storm and in the calm. That even the smallest act of kindness, a door opened on a rainy night, could change the course of lives. The storm had come and gone. The house was patched, the bills eased, the fridge fuller than it had been in months. But the real change was harder to measure. It lived in Noah's chest, in the quiet reassurance that even when life had stripped him of so much, he still had something to give. And in giving he had received something greater in return. Hope renewed,